So it has, of course, been a tough week with COVID news, and as picturesque as it is when the leaves turn, it also brings with it a lot shorter days and a lot colder weather. So if you're thinking, maybe now is the time to think about sneaking a little break, it looks like there is deals in them there hills. Which is with us is Eoghan Corry from Air and Travel magazine, of which he is the editor. Eoghan, how are you?
Good morning, Anton. Yeah, and good, enjoying the autumnal luxury that Catherine was talking about out in North Kildare as well, where I've just driven in from this morning.
It's weather for some.
It's a beautiful country at this time of the year, isn't it?
Well, if you find yourself pinned in somewhere not as picturesque as North Kildare and you want to head off, what sort of deals are available?
We have pretty good sales out there, and I expect more of them. The way, the pattern of travel before COVID, all those years ago, is that this is the cheapest time of the year to travel. First 2 weeks in December is when you get the lowest prices in the brochure and the lowest prices on the airline websites, because everybody's mind is elsewhere. Now, after, again, going back to pre-COVID, as soon as the wishbone was pulled apart on the turkey, the brochures came out and people started looking for what was going to happen next summer. They had those great family consultations. 1/3 of all the travel trade sales were in the month of January. Aer Lingus, listeners will remember, look up, it's Aer Lingus and all that stuff, would put in this big flash sale in January. What we saw in the last 2 weeks is both of the Irish airlines throwing into the market pretty good fare sales. They were very different in their shape, as behoves Ryanair as a European airline flying away. One of the great...
Just pull that mic over to you a wee bit there on.
I will do that. One of the great economic stories of the year has been how far Ryanair has moved away of all its European rivals. It is flying 1,000 flights a day more than its nearest rival, which is Turkish. And Lufthansa, which used to be jousting for the position, the Lufthansa group that is, that includes Swiss and Brussels, which used to joust with Ryanair to be Europe's biggest airline, is back in third place. So Ryanair is clearly Europe's biggest airline. They've taken a huge hit. Their losses over the last 2 years would nearly pay for the National Children's Hospital. It's so big. And
although it has to be said, they were in a nice cash position if you have to absorb losses.
They could do it, but what they complain about, and Michael O'Leary is not Queen Micheál O'Leary, as the poem goes. He was been pointing out that everybody else got state aid. So anyway, they've taken this huge hit. But if you look at their accounts, they're factoring in a loss of €200 million over the winter. That means that they're throwing incredible sales into the market during the winter. And Aer Lingus have moved their big January sale forward.
And Aer Lingus is talking, I saw numbers to the order of €200 return to the States.
That's what you're talking about. You see, what's happened is the States opened November the 8th, and there's this great pent-up demand. Some of us even have family members probably flying over to America in the last week. And what happens next is that the fares have been a little bit high because we're still on the very dribbly, basic, thinned out transatlantic service. Aer Lingus' ambition for next year, and again, let's look internationally at the huge achievements of Irish aviation. They're bringing back almost all their schedule. It's easier to name the routes they're not bringing back than the ones they are. Montreal in Canada is not coming back. Miami is not coming back. Minneapolis is not coming back. And Hartford, Connecticut's not coming back. But the rest are all coming back.
Many of them were marginal routes anyway for Aer Lingus.
Seattle, places like that, which wouldn't be viable if Aer Lingus wasn't flying people in from Europe to join the service in Dublin, go through the US immigration, and fly on to Seattle. There would make no sense as point-to-point routes. They're all due back. The scale in which they're due back shows the level of ambition that Lynn Amberton, as the new CEO of Aer Lingus, is showing. If you were to look at a random Saturday in July next year, they will have 10 A330s and 9 A321LRs. That's the narrow bodies that they use for transatlantic. The only airline in Europe that's doing more on a Saturday in July, it's British Airways. So Aer Lingus...
So the only airline in Europe coming out of Ireland, or the only airline in Europe?
Only airline coming out of Europe. Now, we're not counting the American carriers, we're talking about European carriers. British Airways is the only airline
that outstrips
in
Aer Lingus.
Ahead of Aer Lingus in terms of the ambition of the transatlantic. Now, lots can happen between now and then, but that's what's planned and scheduled. So we are so fortunate in this island to have two really strong, ambitious airlines. Where does that reflect on people listening, looking for to get away this morning? Having a look at those amazing Ryanair fares, they've decided to factor in a loss of 200 million this winter.
Just to put bums on seats?
Just to keep their aircraft certified and their pilots licensed, so that, they don't have to queue. And then they plan to make the money next summer. And Aer Lingus' sale, which used to be January for the year, it's already in place, and it's going to remain in place till the end of the year. And the difference, sales are always very, you see this amazing figure. But the two key things about an aircraft sale are when do you book by and when do you fly. So most of the time at Ryanair, you're only allowed 3 months ahead. They're not going to put a July.
Yeah, they want you on a Wednesday or some day like that wrecks everything.
Well, it's actually fly period January to March or something like that. It generally is something like that, and there'll be more flash sales from Ryanair. But Aer Lingus is all the way through next year, and that's a terrific option. Now's the time to look in. Make those decisions. It's the January sale brought forward.
We have loads of questions coming into 53106 for you. A lot of them about logistics and all the rest of it. We've got a daughter in Australia. We still can't make out exactly what the rules are. Do we still have to quarantine if we go over there if we are fully vaccinated, or what?
Your problem with Australia is actually getting there, because the waiting list of people getting into Australia is so long. A lot of Australians are great wanderers, and a lot of them have been waiting to get back for 2 years. The quarantine,
so literally just to get a flight, is that difficult?
Getting a flight is expensive. It really is expensive. Now what the Australians did, as a lot of listeners knew, was they kept the flights going, but they put a cap on the number of people that could come into each of the airports during the entire COVID restrictions. So it's going to take months to clear it. I see schedules being pushed up in February, so eventually we will get into a position that we can actually see this affordable airfares coming back into the market. The quarantine restriction, the mandatory quarantine restriction, I absolutely have no idea, because I heard there was a scheduled date for removal, but I can't actually say it, and the confusion is probably caused by that.
Well, while we're on the topic of COVID and confusion, COVID passports, my name is wrong on it. Will I be
changed?
Really?
I'll tell you why. Is they're not checking them everywhere, but when they do check, it's a big deal. And it's the same with locator forms. And the new language of the traveller is locator forms. Every country, there's a few exceptions. France has a sort of a legal declaration. Sweden doesn't have a locator form.
And who is required to check them? Is it the airline on departure or the country on arrival?
Oddly enough, the country on arrival does less checking than the airline on departure.
So if the airline on departure doesn't check, there is a chance you arrive totally unchecked to wherever you're going?
Well, in theory, you're checked when you land as well, but there's an assumption that this is what government departments do. They put everything onto the airline, because the airline will be called up if they allow someone on without a COVID certificate or a locator form. Both of our major airlines, Aer Lingus and Ryanair, have a facility where you upload that to your boarding pass. Once the first time you've done it, it's a bit of a hassle. The second time after that, it gets, you know the routine. The airline staff know the routine. The COVID certificate, if the name is wrong, there's a facility for changing it. And
but don't risk it if it doesn't match.
Don't risk if it does. Don't risk anything. And don't come without a locator. Lots of people are saying, oh, they're not checking the locator. They are. I've been checked maybe 14%, 2 out of 7 times when I'm coming into Dublin Airport. I'm not checked the whole lot. And some people say, oh, I came through with no checks. It's the same as a passport. You have to have it right, because the consequences for not having it right. And this is really important with locator forms. Locator forms are complicated. Don't leave it till you're going to the airport.
Now, sorry, because I'm totally unfamiliar with this. The locator form says where you are going to be when you arrive. Is that it?
Each country wants to know exactly what you're doing and where you are in case somebody on the aircraft.
So you need the COVID cert that proves that you're vaccinated.
That's right.
You need the COVID test that proves that you're clear.
You used to have 2 pieces of
and you need the locator form.
used to have two, basically your boarding pass and your passport. Now you need your boarding pass, your passport, your QR code for your digital COVID certificate, and a locator form. And a locator form in Spain, the way Spain was reconquered from the Moors means that there's 8,000 municipalities in Spain, and they're quite different from each other, and they ask for the municipality. And I can tell you, their guys go off to Santa Ponza, don't even know what country they're in, never mind what municipality is. So what you got to do is make sure that you have these sort of details. And Portugal will ask the postcode. And Canada, when I filled out the Canadian one, they looked for the date of your first vaccination. Everyone looks for the date of your second vaccination. It's very easily accessed.
Oh, yeah, but who remembers the date of that first?
Who remembers the date of the first? So
Lingus,
don't do it hurriedly is the answer.
Aer Lingus used to fly to an airport near my sister in France, but the route still isn't showing. Does Eoghan know if they're ever going to bring these kind of routes back? I would prefer to fly direct than to Paris and take the train.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big issue for the loading of the schedule for next summer that Aer Lingus haven't filled out a lot of those routes. Now, what's going on? Certainly the ones that were subcontracted, which were to Stobart, and now are being taken over by Emerald Air. The dates for the resumption of Emerald Air services were hopelessly optimistic. Everyone saw that when they went in quite clearly. A lot of the Aer Lingus regional routes are not going to be resumed on the date that they said. And the stuff that's not in the schedule, it's not that it won't come back, it just means that it's not being considered at the moment. And another thing has happened, Ryanair moved on with some of those Aer Lingus regional routes, so they mightn't come back. Ryanair are just jumping everywhere they can to put bums in seats, as you say.
How out of character. Can I ask on that one? If you go on an airline's website and a flight is available, does that mean it's really there, or will they allow you to book flights without them knowing whether or not that route is going to have an aircraft on it?
Really important question, Anton. A lot of what happens with the seat sales is getting what the mood to travel is, because consumer sentiment is way behind both the medical advice and the airlines on this. Up to 2 weeks they can cancel.
So if they don't fill the flight and you're the only body on it, they can say, we're done, tough luck.
After 2 weeks, there are sort of compensation terms that kick under EU 261. But up to 2 weeks, they can cancel. Now, they don't tell you, we're leaving you behind. They say, we're moving your flight to... And most...
a neighbouring country.
No, it should be the same. They have to get you to the airport they told you, not somewhere.
But they can route you around the planet to get you there if they want.
They can do two things. They can route you around the planet to somewhere else, or they can move you to another flight. And most of our flight routes from Dublin, we used to have 200. We still have 130 after COVID, which is amazing. But most of them are multiple frequency in a day. So they will move your flight around, but there's absolutely, because it's in the schedule doesn't mean it's going to fly.
Two other things. A text coming in saying that somebody just back from a US trip on one of the A321s that you described, the long-range narrow bodies, absolutely rammed, apparently, packed to the gills.
All of them are. I mean, everybody's looking for 80% load factors. Like, there's no regulation about keeping seats empty. That was something that happened very early, and some of the Asian airlines did it. But in aviation terms...
It must feel strange to go from a departure lounge where you are socially distanced and then get crammed sitting beside somebody on an aluminium tube.
The absolute gold standard of contact tracing is what the aviation industry have. They know where you are. They know your how many times you've flown.
Which municipality you've landed in.
Which municipality you've landed in. And they have your phone number. And I was contacted myself after a flight to say somebody in my vicinity had tested positive and I had to pop off for my PCR. The contact tracing that is available for people who are flying is way, it's so far ahead of the contact tracing that's available to society at large.
Very quick before we go, would you recommend the airline's own websites or aggregators, or where if you're trying to get the best deals?
Stay clear of aggregators.
So go direct to the website.
The whole thing unraveled with aggregators, with the refunds, trying to get your money back off an aggregator. If you're directly booked with an airline, they know who you are and they can get your money back if anything goes wrong.